He created something that changed the world, a system that could make people rich, powerful, and free, yet he wanted none of it. No face, no fame, no identity, just a name, Satoshi Nakamoto. Billions of dollars moved because of what he built. People argue about him on podcasts, tweet theories, make documentaries, but no one's ever seen him. He could have been anyone. A billionaire sitting in silence, a college student behind a keyboard, a ghost disguised as a genius. The man who gave the world Bitcoin vanished the moment the world noticed him. Think about that. In an age where everyone is desperate to be seen, the one who changed everything chose to disappear. Maybe he wasn't hiding from others. Maybe he was hiding from us. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: we all want to be seen. But we also fear being seen too clearly. We want to influence the world, but not be judged by it. We dream of recognition, but the moment the spotlight turns toward us, we flinch. Satoshi didn't vanish because he was weak. He vanished because he understood what visibility costs. Fame is not freedom, it's exposure. And exposure is vulnerability. But what happens when ordinary people live the same way? When millions of minds stay silent online, watching but never speaking, existing but never appearing? That's where this story begins, inside the psychology of invisibility. Why some people never post, why some voices never leave the drafts folder, and what it really means to fear the light in the age of screens. Stay till the end, because once you understand this, you'll never look at your own silence the same way again. You've seen them. You might even be one of them. People who never post, never speak, never write a single word online. They scroll through stories, like a few things, and then disappear as if their presence was a ghost passing through a digital crowd. Their accounts look empty, but their minds are full of opinions they never say, full of pictures they never share, full of thoughts that never see daylight. We live in the loudest age in human history, and yet silence has become the new survival instinct. Why? Because once upon a time, people feared being forgotten. Now, they fear being seen. It's strange, isn't it? We live on platforms built for expression, but we've turned them into museums of performance. Everyone curates, polishes, edits. The moment doesn't matter. The perception does. And if you can't match the performance, you'd rather vanish than risk humiliation. Here's the thing. Social media didn't just give us a stage. It gave us an audience that never blinks. Every time you post, 100 invisible eyes judge the tone of your voice, the symmetry of your smile, the grammar of your caption. You're not sharing a moment, you're submitting a performance review. No wonder silence feels safer. But there's a hidden cost. Every time you hold back a thought, you reinforce the belief that your truth doesn't matter. And over time, silence becomes identity. Let me tell you about Howard Hughes. He was one of the richest men who ever lived, an aviation pioneer, film director, and business genius. He could buy entire cities if he wanted. But by the end of his life, he refused to see anyone. He locked himself inside dark hotel rooms, shut off from sunlight, terrified of being touched, watched, or judged. What began as control became prison. He's not that different from many people today. Only our prisons have Wi-Fi. We hide behind screens, avoid posting pictures, tell ourselves we're just private. But beneath that privacy lies something older, the fear of exposure. Because the moment you show yourself, you risk being seen not as you wish to be seen, but as you truly are. And that, for most people, is unbearable. Let's pause here. Think of your camera roll. How many photos live there, unseen? Moments of laughter, travel, or reflection, all trapped behind one thought. What will they think? It's a quiet tragedy of our time, millions of memories living in digital exile. But here's what's truly fascinating. We've confused invisibility with control. We think that by staying silent, we're protecting our peace. But often we're just protecting our fear. Psychologists call it evaluation anxiety. It's not the fear of speaking, it's the fear of being evaluated for what you say. And social media turned that fear into a 24/7 theater. You post something, silence, no likes, no comments. Just that sinking feeling, did anyone even notice? Or worse, did they notice and not care? So you retreat, and each retreat makes the next attempt harder. That's how online silence becomes a habit, and habits shape identity. Nikola Tesla once said, "Isolation is essential for invention." But even he, a man who spoke to lightning and dreamed of wireless power, fell into the trap of solitude. He died alone, feeding pigeons in a hotel room, his ideas misunderstood by the world he tried to electrify. Tesla's isolation wasn't noble. It was the price of being unseen. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Social media shyness is just a modern form of that same loneliness born not of arrogance, but of disconnection. People hide not because they don't care, but because they care too much. They care about judgment, image, approval. They care about saying the wrong thing and losing invisible points in a game no one ever explained. We've built digital kingdoms where everyone wants to be king and everyone fears exile. So they stay quiet, they scroll, they watch, they envy, and then they disappear back into the crowd unseen, unheard, unknown. But deep down, something in them whispers, "I want to be seen." Not liked, not worshipped, just seen. And that whisper is where our story begins. Here's the thing about silence. It rarely begins as a choice. It begins as protection. Most people who stay invisible online aren't doing it because they don't have opinions. They're doing it because somewhere deep down, they were once punished for having one. You see, social media didn't create insecurity. It just magnified it, put a spotlight on every hidden corner of self-doubt we already carried. That's why this fear feels so personal. Because it is. Think back. Maybe you once said something honest and someone laughed. Maybe a teacher mocked your voice. Maybe your parents told you, "Not everything needs to be said." And that line became a law, a rule that still whispers in your head each time you want to speak up. That's the real algorithm running inside people's minds, the one that censors truth before it's even typed. Emily Dickinson lived long before social media, but she understood this fear better than anyone. She wrote nearly 2,000 poems, but hid almost all of them in a drawer. Only a handful were ever published while she was alive. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't indifferent. She was terrified. She once wrote, "Publication is the auction of the mind." To her, sharing meant surrendering control, handing your soul to strangers who could misread, mock, or mutilate it. Now pause and look at what we've built. We auction our minds daily, and the currency is validation. A post gets 2 likes, you question your worth. A story gets no replies, you delete it. One bad comment and your confidence collapses like glass. That's not shyness. That's trauma dressed as caution. But Emily's silence came from something even deeper. The illusion of purity. She believed her work was too delicate for the world. And so she chose isolation over exposure, control over chaos. Sound familiar? That's what most people do online. They call it privacy, but what it really is self-protection disguised as sophistication. "I'm just not the kind of person who posts," they say. But that sentence hides another one. "I'm afraid my voice won't survive the noise." We tell ourselves it's better to stay unseen than to be misunderstood. But in truth, misunderstanding is how connection begins. You can't be known without being misread first. Now let's shift the frame. Think of Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher who practically invented existential psychology, a man obsessed with identity, masks, and the fear of being real. Kierkegaard didn't just write books, he wrote under pseudonyms, different names for different parts of himself. One book argued with the next. He created fake identities to express the truths he couldn't say as himself. That's the oldest form of social media shyness, fragmenting your soul to stay safe. And what do we do now? We post different versions of ourselves. A filtered selfie here. A polished thought there. A private story only a few can see. We think it's freedom, but it's fragmentation. You're not avoiding exposure, you're dividing yourself into acceptable pieces. And the tragedy is that these pieces never meet. Kierkegaard once said, "The greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world." He was right. You can lose yourself without making a sound, without deleting a single post, just by constantly editing who you are until there's nothing left that feels honest. Now imagine this. A person spends hours online every day, yet never posts. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they've trained their brain to see self-expression as danger. Every caption becomes a courtroom. Every word a potential weapon that could turn against them. And so they live in observation mode, safer, quieter, but emptier. Let's pull this into today's world. Think of the influencers who seem fearless online, the ones who share everything. Smiling vacations, perfect homes, picture-perfect lives. But meet them offline, and you'll often find the opposite. Anxiety, exhaustion, a constant need to control how they're seen. They built empires on visibility, but lost the comfort of being unseen. So, on one side, you have the silent watchers, afraid to speak. On the other, the performers, afraid to stop speaking. Both are trapped, one by fear of exposure, the other by addiction to it. And somewhere in between those extremes sits truth. The ability to share without performing, to express without begging for applause. Here's a thought experiment. Imagine if every person on social media posted one raw truth about themselves. Not a filtered photo, not a clever caption, just one real thought. Would the internet collapse? No. It would breathe. But people don't do it, because honesty feels like stepping out of the bunker. You can't predict who will shoot. That's why social media shyness isn't all IT weakness, it's awareness that ES turned defensive. It's the realization that the internet doesn't forgive mistakes. It screenshots them, memes them, turns vulnerability into content. So we silence ourselves to stay clean. We censor to survive. We call it wisdom, but it's fear in disguise. Here's the paradox. The quieter you become, the louder the world gets. And one day, you look around and realize you've become a spectator in your own story. That's the cost of fear. You lose your place in the narrative. Perfection looks beautiful from a distance. Clean lines, flawless faces, captions that sound poetic but empty. It smells like control, sharp, sterile, and safe. But here's the truth. Perfection isn't about excellence. It's about fear. The fear of being seen before you're ready. The fear of being judged before you've finished building the mask. We live in an age where nothing is ever good enough to post. Not your writing, not your picture, not even your thoughts. So you keep polishing, editing, filtering, and by the time it's ready, it's lifeless. That's how perfection kills expression quietly, politely, completely. Let's talk about Franz Kafka. He was a bureaucrat by day, a writer by night. He wrote stories about people crushed by invisible systems, men trapped in nightmares of rules they could never escape. But what most people don't know is that Kafka lived that nightmare. He ordered his best friend to burn all his unpublished manuscripts after his death, because he thought none of them were good enough. He created entire worlds of genius, and then tried to erase them. Sound familiar? That's what perfectionism does. It turns creation into self-erasure. You end up deleting your best work before the world even gets a chance to judge it. And isn't that what many of us do online? We delete the caption 6 times. We rewrite the post until the life drains out of it. We stare at the camera roll, scrolling through hundreds of moments that never made it past the maybe later folder. You know what's behind all of that? A voice that whispers, wait until it's perfect. But perfection never arrives. It just postpones courage indefinitely. Kafka lived that way. Tesla did too. Nikola Tesla was one of the most brilliant minds to ever exist. He dreamed of free energy, wireless power, global communication, things that sounded like madness in his time, but built the modern world. Yet he died alone in a small hotel room, feeding pigeons and talking to ghosts of ideas that the world never valued while he lived. Tesla didn't fail because he lacked genius. He failed because he couldn't translate his genius into connection. He despised self-promotion. He thought the work should speak for itself, but in a world that rewards noise, silence is mistaken for weakness. And that's the same trap perfectionists fall into online. They believe their work should speak for itself. But the algorithm doesn't care about purity. It rewards presence. Here's the paradox. Perfectionists crave recognition, but they fear exposure. They want applause, but hate the stage. They want to be known, but only for the version of themselves that doesn't exist yet. so they freeze. There's a silent torment in that freeze. You scroll through others' highlights, compare your drafts to their finished reels, and conclude you're not enough. That comparison slowly becomes identity, and identity becomes paralysis. It's like living inside a museum of mirrors, every reflection showing a version of who you should be, but never who you are. And the tragic part? No one tells you this prison is self-built. You made the bars. You polished them until they shined. You told yourself it was discipline, taste, excellence. But it was fear disguised as art direction. Let's bring this to the modern stage. Have you ever seen those influencers whose lives look surgically perfect? Every day, a new trip, a new outfit, a new piece of wisdom squeezed into a 15-second clip. They seem flawless, but if you look closer, you can see the exhaustion in their eyes. They're trapped too. Not by silence, but by performance. They can't stop posting because stopping means fading. Their prison isn't invisibility, it's immortality. They built their worth on visibility, so now every day they must prove they still exist. The irony is cruel, the ones who never post fear being seen, and the ones who always post fear being forgotten. Two sides of the same psychological coin, one ruled by shame, the other by dependence, and both are starving for something real. The perfectionist hides because they fear rejection. The performer overshares because they fear emptiness. Different strategies, same wound. The need for control. Control over how people see you. Control over what they think. Control over how much of your soul escapes the mask. But control and peace cannot coexist, because peace requires acceptance, and acceptance means imperfection. Here's the harsh truth most people never admit. You don't need to be perfect to be respected, you just need to be seen being real. And that's the hardest courage to practice in a world addicted to filters. The great philosophers of old called it authentic existence. To exist without editing, to let your flaws breathe, to show your cracks without apology. But on social media, cracks don't get likes, they get memes. So we hide again. And hiding, day after day, becomes who we are. You start thinking, I'm not the kind of person who posts. But what you really mean is, I'm not the kind of person who risks being seen failing. Let that sink in. If failure is fatal, then growth is impossible. If rejection is unbearable, then authenticity is extinct. That's the silent cost of perfection. You trade your voice for control. You trade expression for safety. And in that trade, you lose yourself. But it doesn't have to stay that way. Because there's a difference between silence and stillness. Silence hides. Stillness observes. One comes from fear, the other from awareness. Let's be honest. Social media is not a window, it's a mirror. Every scroll, every like, every silence reflects something about you. And most people don't like what they see. Because what you see online isn't the world. It's your shadow projected outward. Every post you admire reveals what you wish you could be. Every post you judge reveals what you fear you already are. We think we're browsing others, but we're really browsing ourselves. Here is the thing, the human brain was never built to handle thousands of comparisons a day. Our ancestors compared themselves to maybe 20 people in a tribe. You? You compare yourself to 20,000 on a screen before lunch. That's not communication. That's psychological warfare. You see a friend's promotion, someone's vacation, someone's flawless morning routine, and without realizing it, your mind whispers, I'm behind. That whisper grows roots. It shapes how you speak, what you post, what you don't post. You become careful, curated, calculated. And slowly, authenticity gets replaced with performance. This is the mirror effect, where your digital reflection becomes more important than your actual self. Let's look at Franz Kafka again, but this time from a different lens. He didn't just fear imperfection, he feared misinterpretation. He once wrote, I am a cage in search of a bird. He meant that he'd built a self so tight, so anxious, that even his soul couldn't fly inside it. That's what many people have become, online digital cages, chasing attention that never fills the void. They spend hours crafting the perfect version of themselves, and when it's finally posted, they feel emptier than before. Why? Because validation doesn't satisfy insecurity. It feeds it. When someone likes your photo, you get a dopamine hit. But when the likes slow down, you crash. You start to wonder, what's wrong with me today? Nothing's wrong. You're just addicted to being seen. And that's how the mirror traps you. Here's a paradox worth sitting with. You post to be seen, but you scroll to hide. You crave attention, but resent the attention others get. You're both the performer and the audience in your own psychological play. And over time, that double life breaks you. Let me tell you a story, a modern one. A few years ago, a popular influencer with millions of followers deleted everything overnight. No announcement, no drama, just silence. People thought she'd been hacked. Weeks later, she returned not with pictures, but with a video. She said she couldn't recognize herself anymore. That every day she woke up and lived for the algorithm, not for her mind, her art, or her peace. She had become a brand, a name with no face, a smile with no joy. That's the extreme end of the mirror effect. You build a reflection so perfect that it starts living without you, and you're left behind tired, hollow, staring at your own creation like Frankenstein watching his monster walk away. The truth is, the internet rewards visibility, but punishes vulnerability. If you show too much, they call you attention-seeking. If you show too little, they forget you. You're forced to balance on a wire, not falling, not flying. This is why so many stay silent. It's not just fear of judgment anymore, it's fatigue from performing. They see the noise, the arguments, the outrage cycles, and think, what's the point of adding my voice to this chaos? So they stop, and their silence becomes self-preservation. But here's the twist. When silence comes from fear, it suffocates. When it comes from wisdom, it heals. The difference is awareness. Let's bring Nikola Tesla back into this. Tesla was a man obsessed with energy, not just electricity, but human energy. He once said, if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. He believed every thought sent a vibration into the world. Now imagine how social media amplifies that. Every post, every thought, every opinion a vibration, echoing through millions of minds. But most people post unconsciously, out of insecurity, out of envy, out of fear. So the energy online becomes polluted. And the silent ones, the watchers, they feel that noise deeply. They sense the falseness, so they retreat. They tell themselves they're protecting their peace, but they're really absorbing everyone else's chaos. It's like standing in a crowded room full of mirrors, each mirror showing a distorted reflection of who you should be. You turn away from one only to face another, until finally you close your eyes just to breathe. That's what withdrawal from social media really is, a reflex of the soul trying to find quiet. But here's the deeper truth. You can't run from the mirror, because the mirror isn't the app, it's the mind. Social media only shows what's already there. If you feel invisible online, it's because you've been invisible to yourself. If you fear being seen, it's because you haven't made peace with what's inside. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the parts of us we hide because they don't fit our desired image. Social media just digitized the shadow. You can't outsmart it with filters. You can't silence it with likes. You can only meet it face to face. That's the mirror effect in its purest form. Not punishment, not perfection, reflection. And if you're brave enough to look long enough, you'll see something unexpected staring back, not the person you wish to be, but the person who's been waiting to be free. There comes a moment in every silent person's life when the weight of unspoken thoughts becomes heavier than the fear of being heard. That's the turning point when silence stops protecting you and starts suffocating you. For some, it happens suddenly. A heartbreak, a loss, a realization that the world is moving forward while you're standing still. For others, it's quiet, a gradual ache, a slow awakening that whispers, "You've hidden long enough." And when that moment arrives, something ancient stirs inside the instinct to speak. But what does it mean to truly speak in a world full of noise? It's not about shouting. It's not about posting every thought or chasing likes. It's about reclaiming your ability to express without apology, to show yourself without disguises, to exist without asking for permission. That's what I call the return to voice. You see, every voice begins in fear. Children are born loud, unfiltered, expressive, real. Then the world teaches them shame. Don't say that. Be quiet. People will think you're weird. And so they learn to edit themselves. By the time they grow up, their voice isn't a truth anymore, it's a negotiation. Social media just became the adult version of that classroom, a space where everyone's trying to speak without offending, create without failing, be seen without being judged. And the result? Silence. But here's the paradox. You can find your voice by waiting for the world to accept it. You find it by using it when no one is clapping. That's the kind of courage that transforms silence into power. Let me tell you a story that captures this perfectly. In the 1800s, Emily Dickinson wrote poems she never shared. She believed her words were too strange, too raw, too misunderstood. It wasn't until after her death that the world discovered her genius. She wanted safety. But her silence made her immortal. Now imagine if she had spoken while she lived, if she had risked being seen flawed, human, and alive. How many hearts might she have reached in her own time? That's the tragedy of unspoken brilliance. It dies before it ever breathes. And that's happening today, on a massive scale. Millions of people with insight, creativity, humor, empathy, all silent because they fear digital disapproval. But here's the truth. No one remembers who stayed quiet. History only remembers those who dared to leave a sound. Søren Kierkegaard once wrote, "Life can only be understood backward, but it must be lived forward." Meaning you can't wait for perfect understanding before you act. You act first, and meaning follows. So when it comes to your voice, stop rehearsing. Start speaking. Because the voice you withhold today might be the wisdom someone else needs tomorrow. But what does this look like in practice? It doesn't mean you suddenly start posting everything. It means you start posting honestly. If you feel joy, share it. If you feel doubt, say it. If you see beauty in something small, capture it without polishing it to death. Don't edit the life out of your truth just to make it palatable. Perfection never built connection. Imperfection did. The reason silence hurts so deeply is because it kills connection not with others, but with yourself. You can't feel whole when half your thoughts are hidden. That's why people who speak even awkwardly, even clumsily, often seem more alive. They've chosen expression over suppression, and that choice is freedom. Remember Howard Hughes, the billionaire who locked himself in darkness, hiding from the gaze of the world. He had wealth, genius, power, but he lost peace. He couldn't face being seen in his imperfection. And that fear ate him alive. Now compare that to someone like Nikola Tesla, misunderstood, mocked, forgotten, yet he kept creating. He didn't care about fame or applause. His voice wasn't loud, but it was pure. He spoke through his work, through light, through invention. He expressed even when no one listened. That's the lesson. The point isn't to be heard by everyone. It's to be true to yourself. Because here's the ultimate truth. You can't master your voice until you make peace with your echo. People will misunderstand you. They'll twist your words, ignore your ideas, scroll past your truth. That's fine, because expression was never meant to please everyone. It's meant to free you. When you express from truth, not performance, something incredible happens. You stop chasing validation and start creating resonance. People who need your words will find them not because you screamed the loudest, but because you spoke the truest. Let's zoom out. Look at the world we live in, an endless feed of opinions, emotions, and illusions. Everyone's speaking, but few are saying anything real. That's why when you finally speak from honesty, it cuts through the noise like thunder. You don't need to go viral. You need to be vital. You need to say something that matters not to millions, but to one person who has been silently waiting to hear someone articulate what they've always felt but never said. That's how revolutions begin, not with armies, but with articulation. The first step toward freedom isn't shouting louder, it's whispering honestly. And if you can do that, you're already ahead of most. So here's your choice. Stay hidden and safe. Or speak and evolve. Your silence won't protect you forever. It will just delay your growth. Because the truth always finds a way out either through expression or through pain. If you don't express consciously, your body will do it for you. In anxiety, in frustration, in regret. So speak. Even if your voice shakes, even if no one likes it, even if it's just a few words that finally say, "This is who I am." Because that's the real freedom, not applause, not perfection, truth spoken without fear. And when that happens, silence stops being a prison. It becomes a choice, a pause, a power. The kind of silence that doesn't come from fear of being seen, but from peace with being known. He built something eternal, a system so powerful that it outlived its creator. Satoshi Nakamoto walked away from his own empire not for wealth, not for fame, but for peace. And maybe that's what we're all trying to do, find peace in a world that keeps demanding we perform. But here's the truth Satoshi never said aloud: you can disappear from the world, but you can't disappear from yourself. You can stay quiet, avoid the crowd, refuse to post, refuse to speak, but silence doesn't make you invisible. It just makes you heavy with the words you never said. The revolution he built was in technology. The revolution you must build is in the mind. Because what good is a world that connects billions if it disconnects you from your own voice? You don't need to be loud. You don't need to be famous, you just need to be real. Maybe that's how you start your own kind of freedom, not by vanishing into the noise, but by daring to exist without filters, without masks, without fear. Satoshi's story was about control. Yours can be about expression. Because one day, all the things you were too afraid to say will turn into the things you wish you had said. And when that day comes, you'll realize the world didn't need another ghost. It needed you. Stay aware, stay awake, and don't stay silent.